Should the Dodgers go after Matt Chapman? We'll look at the pros and cons of the veteran third baseman. And then we'll take a look at some news and notes from around MLB. Nothing groundbreaking, but we might as well break it down for you. That's what's coming up. So let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, and right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. This is a daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And if you want to become an everydayer, it's very easy. All you have to do is listen or watch every day or close to every day as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to subscribe wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube and get notified when our episodes are ready for you. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio and usually joined by co-host Jeff Snider, but Jeff covered for me last night, so I'm covering for him in this episode. And Jeff and I are both lifelong Dodger fans. We have watched a lot of Dodger games in our life. We have covered the team in various capacities over the years. Right now, one of those ways is doing this podcast. We've been in the press box, been in the locker room. We've talked to players. We've interviewed players. We've done all that stuff. But we're not insiders. We're just here to bring you, the Dodger fan take on things, the hopefully knowledgeable Dodger fan take on things, and, hopefully give you something you can talk about with your other Dodger fan friends and family. And that's what I'm here to do today. Once again, no real news from the baseball world in terms of signings or even big rumors. It was, I guess there was a couple things. One, Padres hired Mike Shildt as their manager. He was already in the organization. You might remember him. He used to be the Cardinals manager for a couple years there a few years ago. He was in the organization. They ended up going with him. And then the Cardinals made another signing. After signing Lance Lynn, they also signed Kyle Gibson, who allowed the most hits in the big leagues last year, if I'm not mistaken. So now they have the guy that allowed the most hits last year in the majors and the most home runs last year in the majors. So, they're building a rotation over there, or at least a back end of the rotation. I'd hope for them, or maybe not. I don't really care if the Cardinals are good or not. But yeah, so that's kind of what happened in the baseball news world. Wasn't much beyond that. And so that got me thinking about, some Dodgers potential free agents. And, when you look at position players, there's not much. And especially when it comes to what the Dodgers need. Cody Bellinger is probably the number one position player available. Well, only position player, even though Ohtani will be only a position player for 2024. But Bellinger is the only full-time position player, or at least that plays a defensive position. And number two is on most of those lists is Matt Chapman. And I'll preface going into this Matt Chapman talk as I don't believe Matt Chapman will be considered unless the Dodgers do not get Shohei Ohtani. If they do get Shohei Ohtani, they would have to have a lot of moving pieces in order to incorporate Chapman. That would mean that Max Muncy would have to play second base, or they say, hey, Max Muncy, go learn how to play, left field, which I don't see happening. I could see a move to second base, but in that regard, it would require like Matt Chapman to be a bargain rather than kind of what he's being predicted to get right now in the open market. So all this Matt Chapman talk is under the prerequisite that the Dodgers did not get Shohei Ohtani. And that's, like I said, that's really the only way it makes sense for Chapman. We're going to go, kind of the positives, the pros of getting Chapman, and then kind of lean into why you shouldn't get Chapman, and then talk about kind of what a contract would look like. The pros for Chapman, the number one pro for him is defense at third base. And, for a while there, the Dodgers had Justin Turner, who was very good defensively, very solid defensively, might have won a Gold Glove, or at least had more of a chance if Nolan Arenado hadn't been in the National League for all those years that he was here. But then his defense went down last year. The Dodgers had mostly Max Muncy at their base, and we've talked about his defense at length. It's not great defense. He can be solid defensively in terms of making all the plays you need to make, in terms of making, any plays that are above and beyond. He's not great at, but if he can just be solid at making the routine plays, the Dodgers would take that for sure. But, for Matt Chapman, most of his, or the greatest part of his value is on defense. And, last year, for over his career, he's been a, 4-WAR player, which is, all-star to 4-WAR and above is usually all-star level, or maybe more 5 wars all-star level. But 4 is a very solid player. Last year he dropped a little bit in terms of 3.5 F-WAR, but most of that chunk was defensively, and he's fallen off a little bit defensively, even from his peak a few years ago, but he's still very solid defensively. And that's obviously where a lot of this stuff's going to come. If you were judging him just on his offensive profile, he might not command. I think MLB Trade Rumors has him at 6 years, 150 mil, so $25 million a year. That's definitely not all from offensive value. That's pretty much mostly from defensive value. And, having that value at third base is huge, especially now with, the way teams are. If you can prevent more runners being on base, you can prevent, especially for the Dodgers, at least how it was last year for part of the year. Preventing runners is preventing runners in scoring position for the most part, because any guy you prevent from getting to first base, you're now more likely than you were at any time before to prevent them from getting to second base because of stolen bases and the way teams have been running a little bit differently with the new rules. So, and it's something the Dodgers haven't had in a few years now in terms of like more elite defense at third base. So, obviously that's number one, what's good about Matt Chapman. Number two, you're looking at offensive profile, and there's numbers that stand out that aren't great. I think if you look at Chapman counting numbers last year, not the best. He had a 755 OPS. He had 17 homers, 66 RBI, or 54 RBI in 140 games. So definitely not great. He did have a 110 WRC plus, so he was above average, at least offensively. But it's just nothing to write home about it. It's just a solid, so it's just solid. Nothing above the line. But you go back to past years, and he's hit upward of 36 home runs before, which was back in 2019. He's driven in 75 plus runs over multiple years over the last few years with Oakland, and then with Toronto last year, he had 27 homers, 76 RBIs with the 118 WRC plus. Topped out at 139 back in 2018. So he's had offensive value and still has offensive value, but it's just a little bit different than it was before. I think what stands out that gives you some hope, last year he started off very, very, very hot, and it was like, oh, free agent year, Matt Chapman, looking to get paid. And then he cooled off. That was basically just the first month of the season. After that, he kind of cooled off, leveled off. And, like I said, 17 homers, not amazing. 755 OPS, not amazing. 110 WRC plus, solid, solid with the defensive value he brings. That's, pretty good. But you look at his baseball savant page and there's a lot to like there. There's his average exit velocity last year in the 98th percentile, his barrel percentage in the 98th percentile, his hard hit percentage in the all the way 100th percentile. 56.4% of the time hard hit. His chase percentage 94th percentile, so didn't chase much. He did strike out, and we'll talk about that in the cons. He did have some strikeout issues, but when he did hit the ball, hit it hard, barreled it up, and maybe fell not so much unlucky because his BABIP was higher than his career, but also that could be aided by the fact that he hit the ball harder than he has in recent years, and was up there in hard hit percentage. He especially coming from 2021 season, his hard hit percentage was 30% of the time, and then he bumped that up the last 2 years to get back. And he's also hitting the ball in the air a little bit more than he did in the past. Cutting out, line drives about the same. Ground ball, he's cut the ground ball percentage. He's put the ball in the air a little bit more. So, when you can hit the ball hard and you go about it that way, I think, that you have great value in terms of, especially with the Dodgers. Like if they can tweak a couple of things in your swing, maybe fix some of the other things, then you're looking at some good value in terms of offensive numbers. There are more pros and a couple cons, and then we'll look at contract value for Matt Chapman. That's what's coming up, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score this NFL season with America's number one sportsbook, FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. A moneyline bet is simply choosing which team is going to win the game. There are 3 games on Thanksgiving. There's a game on Black Friday, and then there's a bunch of games on Sunday. No need to wait to go beyond this week. Go pick a game that you like, who you think is going to win. If you think the Lions are going to beat the Packers, then go put down at least $5 on the Lions to win on the money line, and you can win $150 in bonus bets back. And bonus bets basically just means $150 to make bets in order to get actual money. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to join and get in on the action than right now. The app is very easy to use, and if you're more experienced, better, there's a wide range of betting options beyond moneyline, spreads, player props, over-under, same-game parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Make sure to find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. And remember, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, let's get back into Matt Chapman talking. We're talking about the pros being defense and the fact that he hits the ball hard, and that there might be some more offensive value to extract from him. And I think that's with anybody the Dodgers sign. I think that's kind of the thought process, is that if he has certain things that they excel at, or certain things that certain things the Dodgers see that they could help with, they're going to go after it. And I think for a guy like Matt Chapman, who's had offensive success, has seen his strikeout rate climb over the years. He used to strike out in his peak. He was striking out, well, his 2 peak years, he was striking out less than 24% of the time. That ramped up to 35% of the time in 2020. He cut it down to 32 in 2021, 27.4 last year, 28.4 this year. So, a lot of strikeouts, yes, but again, it's supplemented by when he does hit the ball, he hits it very hard. And the Dodgers can just kind of, make those couple tweaks, and he doesn't chase. So he's swinging and missing mostly in the zone, in terms of, he's not chasing very much. And I think that's something, you could figure out if you're the Dodgers and you have the hitting coaches and everything else. So I think that there's a lot of, so look, he swings out of the zone, he only swings 22.5% of the time. In the zone, he swings 69.2% of the time. So he's definitely missing in the zone a lot of time. And he misses more in the zone than most people do. So I think that's something the Dodgers could fix. So, when it comes to defense, when it comes to hitting the ball hard, when it comes to tweaks that can be made, I think those are all in favor of signing Matt Chapman. And I think, kind of the last thing here is, he seems to be, a good. it sometimes it comes down to he's a good guy, and I haven't heard any issues from him. He's been, obviously in Oakland. He's been with Toronto the last couple of years. He's, been a guy that has competed in the postseason in the past. He hasn't done great in the postseason, but it's a very small sample size. He's only played in 6 games and has hit 273 with a 664 OPS. So there's not much to gain there from in terms of how he is in terms of how he is in the postseason. But some of the cons. He's a little bit older in terms of how many years you're going to give him. He's 31 years old, or he'll be 31 years old when the season starts, or during the season. He, probably going to get a 5-year deal at least. That's, most have him in the 5-6 year deal range, most projections. And, his defense has already gone down a little bit in recent years. So you wonder, how long is that defense going to stay strong to elite, especially if the offense doesn't necessarily pick up. And if the offense stays the same and his defense gets worse, then you lose value already, very quickly in terms of if he's getting $25 million a year. Now, if somehow you get him for cheaper than that, and maybe for less years, or even 5 years, but you get him for more 22 million a year. You can, maybe deal with a little bit more with a slight defensive drop off than you would if it was the other way. But, you look at the cons, and that's one where the defense has gone down. You look at 2, he does strike out a lot, and he's not elite offensively. And, it's kind of, in this scenario, what you're doing is putting Max Muncy at DH, and Max Muncy fits the DH profile. Maybe doesn't hit as well overall, but power wise, number wise, he fits the DH profile. If you're getting strong defense at third base, then you can deal with, maybe not elite production offensively, but it's one of those where you're looking at the cons, you're looking at kind of worst case scenario, and 20 homers and 65 RBI and a slightly above average offensive profile might not be justified, even with and pair that with dwindling defensive metrics, and you're looking at a recipe for a bad contract pretty quickly, assuming everything went a certain way. And again, this is looking at like a doomsday scenario type of deal of, why you shouldn't sign Matt Chapman. And that's kind of what it comes down to is like, if he loses defensive value and doesn't pick up offensive value, then, what he's predicted to sign for is not necessarily worth it. And that's not going to be ideal, but he does strike out a lot, and the power has gone down a little bit, and in terms of home run power, and hard hit percentage is cool stat to kind of think, okay, maybe he's right there, but again, if he's hitting hard hit fly balls to the warning track, and not as many line drives, or loses a little bit of power, whatever the case is, you could see that value kind of dwindling pretty quick, and now you're stuck with a 34-year-old third baseman who's mid defensively, mid offensively, and and at that point, if you're 3 years down the line in a 5-year deal, the Dodgers might just say, you know what, we can move on from you, but whatever the case is, that's looking at worst case scenario cons. Overall, like I said, he's looking at a lot of projections have him in the 5 to 6 year range, around the $25 million a year range. I think, again, all this is prefaced by this is under the scenario that the Dodgers do not get Shohei Ohtani, and they're looking for somebody to, they're looking to move Max Muncy to DH and getting somebody to play third base. I think overall in that scenario, Matt Chapman, you can do a lot worse than Matt Chapman. You could do, you can't do too much better than him, at least. Well, you can't do much better than him on the open market, on free agency. You could do better than him with trades, but there's not, all-star third basemen aren't just readily available in order, to trade. So we would see what happened in that scenario. But I think yes to looking into Matt Chapman if the Dodgers don't sign Shohei Ohtani, but also knowing that there is reason for concern. And you could find that with almost any free agent, obviously. But I do think, the defense still being very good, but being not as good as, previous years, along with the offense, kind of in a weird spot, it makes you a little bit weary. But overall, Matt Chapman would be solid if in the contingency plan the Dodgers don't get Shohei Ohtani. So that's going to do it on Matt Chapman talk. There was a couple of news and notes from around the league in terms of just little things here and there that we've seen over the last few days. So I'll get into those. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Remember, you can become an everydayer by listening or watching to Locked On Dodgers every day. All you got to do is listen or watch every day. You can subscribe wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, and you'll be notified when our episodes are there for you every Monday through Friday. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in the show that the Padres had hired Mike Shildt as their manager. Dave Essay had, I would imagine the source was straight from the horse's mouth. He said that Adrian Gonzalez was a finalist for the job in San Diego, finished in the top 3, which was not a name we had seen reported by anybody else in the past. It was Benji Gill, it was Phil Nevin, Mike Shildt, Flaherty, who the Padres already had. All those names have been mentioned. I don't remember seeing Adrian Gonzalez's name anywhere. So maybe that one was more of the Padres did keep that under wraps for whatever reason. I would imagine Dave Essay heard straight from Adrian Gonzalez. They seem, they have a working and professional relationship, and interesting in the sense that he, at least with the Dodgers specifically, he had an interesting clubhouse reputation. He did help or try to help, Puig in when he was with the Dodgers, and kind of help try to bridge that gap. But also, remember that year he got hurt, and the first round of the playoffs, and he was on vacation with his family and, not at the games or not supporting the team, which was always kind of weird to me. He was, not I'm not bashing Adrian Gonzalez. Like I said, I was around in the clubhouse one of the years he was there back in 2015. I didn't, notice any issues, but I don't think he was the most beloved teammate, and I don't think he was not a liked teammate. I just think he was, he's not a guy that I see and like, oh yeah, he'd make a good manager type of deal. But shout out to him for being in the mix at the very least. And for the Padres and Shield specifically, I think they should have went with Benji Gill personally. I think you have, not that this matters. It's not the end all be all, but and then I don't know how they feel about Shield in that clubhouse, but when you have, for me, it's when your main stars are Latino, so Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, even Xander Bogaerts, who's not Latino, but Curacao, he speaks Spanish, and we've seen the players from Curacao kind of feel more Latino than anything else in terms of most of them speak Spanish. Like Jansen speaks Spanish, Albie speaks Spanish, Xander speaks Spanish, and getting some fresh blood in there in terms of somebody who's been around the game. He managed Team Mexico, Benji Gill, he whatever the case. But hey, Mike Show might be loved in that clubhouse or liked at the very least. So we'll see what happens there. The other thing that was out there, Jeff talked about it. The report from Hector Gomez that the Dodgers could be looking to sign Ohtani and trade for Trout. Angels general manager Perry Manassian reiterated that Mike Trout will be playing for the Angels in 2024. He did note that several large market teams privately inquired about his availability. Again, the Trout thing seemed a little bit of a pipe dream in the sense of I just can't see Artie Moreno greenlighting any deal that sends Mike Trout to the Dodgers. And I'm definitely not gonna take a GM's words of this player will be on the team next year. But I think it is safe to say that Trout probably stays put. And but it was fun to think about, and it's still fun to think about. And you never know, maybe the Dodgers could make a deal large enough in terms of prospects to entice the Angels at the very least. And all you need is one vulnerable moment from Marty Moreno, one enticing deal from the Dodgers, and you can get Mike Trout to LA. So you never know, but we'll see what happens there. Other than that, like I mentioned, Cardinals signed Kyle Gibson. We are a week and a half away from the winter meetings. I would imagine that's when things are going to start picking up again. For the most part, Thanksgiving time has been kind of recognized as slower time. Hopefully everybody's just enjoying time wherever they're doing and can wait till after holidays in order to sign free agents. So yeah, other than that, there was one article from Ohtani continues to be the main talk. Obviously, Ohtani continues to be linked to the Dodgers. There was a report, I don't remember which reporter, kind of said that the Dodgers would have enough and would be willing to go after Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, which would be obviously very fun and very ideal in terms of what they need. And I think Jeff talked about it yesterday where, the Dodgers offering Nola $165 million, I would imagine 5-6 year range, they are going to be maybe a little bit more aggressive than they have in the past. And rightfully so, because, they can't come out of this free agency without 1 to 2 starting pit, with without 1 to 2 starting pitchers that are in the front half of a rotation, and simply say, we got outbid or whatever the case was. Now, in the case of Nola, the report was that teams did outbid the Phillies, and he still decided to go back with him. That's hard to go against, but if he gets to a point, where push comes to shove in terms of not being desperate, but, let's just say like Jordan Montgomery, maybe, okay, we have him pegged, 20 to 22 mil a year. Now he's commanding 25 mil a year. The Rangers are willing to give him 4 years. If you tack on that 5th year or 6th year, whatever the case, he'll sign with you. And then you say, out of our price range, not what we wanted. No, I think this is the year where you go, yes, and just deal with whatever happens after the fact. Not that Jordan Montgomery is more so of an example of a free agent pitcher. I don't think him specifically is who you got on a limb for, but if he was the last one left, then yeah, maybe you have to. So, all right, that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Make sure to find us where we get podcasts and on YouTube. Remember, Locked On has the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with experts, local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. There's also the 24/7 Locked On Los Angeles Sports. You will be on there. You can, all the other Locked On from around NFL, NBA, NHL, college football, all that stuff. Go check it out on YouTube. Go remember, we're also on YouTube and on wherever you get podcasts, Locked On Dodgers. You can also find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM either of us for any questions, comments, or concerns. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, tell your smart device, play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.